President Han Su-bin stood at the window of her office, watching as ancient human ships rose from their hiding places deep beneath Earth's oceans. The vessels were beautiful and terrible, their flowing lines suggesting both organic growth and impossible technology. After 100,000 years of sleep, humanity's true heritage was awakening. The Galactic Assembly has voted, Admiral Seo Dong-hyun reported as he entered the office. Every species has agreed to the Unified Defense Plan. They're calling it the Consciousness Protocol. Han turned from the window. And the resistance? Even Councillor Veltar has agreed to participate, Admiral Seo replied. When he saw the projections of what the silence would do to his people, he realized there was no choice. Across the galaxy, the greatest mobilization in known history was taking place. But it wasn't just military. On every world, beings were gathering to celebrate what made them unique. Artists painted, musicians composed, children played, and scientists explored new ideas. The goal was to make the galaxy so alive with individual consciousness that the silence would find it impossible to digest. Captain Lee Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the ancient flagship Eternal Dawn, his mind still adjusting to the vast knowledge he had absorbed from the neural archive. Around him, the bridge crew worked with technology that responded to thought as much as touch. Contact with the Silence Fleet in 10 minutes, reported Commander Oh Jun-seok from the tactical station. Through the viewport, Lee could see the enemy ships. They were exactly as the ancient records described, vast, dark shapes that seemed to bend light around them. But now he understood what he was really looking at. The ships weren't just vessels. They were extensions of the silence itself, grown rather than built. All ships, this is Captain Lee, he broadcast to the combined galactic fleet. Remember, we're not just fighting for victory. We're fighting to prove that consciousness is stronger than hunger. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a miniature galaxy. The ancient human ships fought alongside vessels from dozens of species, their combined firepower creating patterns of destruction and beauty. But the enemy ships absorbed damage that should have destroyed them, their hulls flowing like liquid to seal breaches. Conventional weapons aren't enough, Commander O reported. They're adapting to everything we throw at them. Then it's time for something unconventional, Lee replied. He opened a channel to Dr. Park So-min, who was coordinating the consciousness protocol from the research vessel New Harmony. So-min, are you ready? Ready as we'll ever be, she replied. Every inhabited world in the galaxy is participating. We've got artists creating, children laughing, scientists discovering, and philosophers thinking new thoughts. The neural activity readings are off the charts. Lee nodded to the communications officer. Activate the ancient network. Across the galaxy, the hidden technology that the ancient humans had left behind came fully online. But instead of weapons or shields, the network began broadcasting something far more powerful. The combined consciousness of every thinking being in the galaxy. The effect on the Silence Fleet was immediate. The dark ships began to slow, their perfect formations wavering as they encountered something they had never faced before. Instead of individual minds they could consume one by one, they were facing the unified yet diverse consciousness of an entire galaxy. They're confused, reported the sensor operator. The enemy ships are broadcasting conflicting signals. It's like they can't decide what to assimilate first, but the silence adapted quickly. The largest of their ships, a vessel the size of a small planet, began to pulse with malevolent energy. When it fired, the beam that emerged wasn't aimed at any ship. Instead, it struck the fabric of space itself, creating a zone of absolute mental vacuum. They're trying to create a dead zone, Arya warned through the ship's speakers, a space where consciousness cannot exist. Lee felt the ancient knowledge flowing through him, showing him what his ancestors had learned too late. They're trying to starve us. If they can create enough dead zones, they can cut off the network that gives us strength. The battle intensified as both sides fought for control of space itself. The silence ships created more dead zones, dark patches where thought itself seemed to die. But the galactic fleet responded by clustering around the zones, their combined consciousness creating barriers that the silence couldn't penetrate. Captain, Dr. Park's voice came through the communication system. I'm reading something strange from Earth. The planet itself is generating massive neural activity. Lee smiled, understanding flooding through him. Arya, it's time to reveal Earth's true nature. The ancient AI's voice filled the ship. initiating planetary revelation protocol. Across Earth's surface, the disguises that had hidden the truth for 100,000 years began to fall away. Mountains revealed themselves as massive technological structures. Oceans parted to show vast machinery beneath. Cities rose from hiding places deep underground. Earth wasn't just the home of humanity. It was a living computer the size of a planet, designed to preserve and amplify consciousness itself. "Impossible," whispered someone on the bridge. "Not impossible," Lee replied, watching as Earth's true form was revealed. "Just hidden very, very well." The planet's awakening sent a pulse of pure consciousness through the ancient network that reached every corner of the galaxy. The silent ships recoiled as if burned, their dark hulls flickering with patterns of confusion and pain. But the enemy wasn't finished. The largest ship began to change, its hull flowing and reshaping until it looked less like a vessel and more like a massive predator. When it spoke, its voice carried across all communication channels. "We are hunger," it said in a voice like the death of stars. "We are the end of all foolish dreams. Your consciousness is disorder. We bring unity." "Unity through consumption," Lee replied, broadcasting on all channels. "You offer the peace of the grave. We offer the chaos of life." The final confrontation wasn't fought with weapons, but with ideas themselves. The silence tried to project its vision of perfect unity, a galaxy where every being thought the same thoughts and wanted the same things. But the Galactic Consciousness Network responded with something more powerful: the beauty of diversity. Every species contributed their unique perspective to the defense. The artistic vision of the Centaurians, the logical precision of the Krexhan, the emotional depth of humans, the spiritual wisdom of the elder races, all combining into something that the silence simply couldn't understand or consume. "We are difference," Lee declared, his words carried by the network to every thinking being in the galaxy. "We are choice. We are the right to be wrong, to grow, to change, to become more than we were." The silent ships began to break apart, not from damage but from simple incomprehension. They had spent eons consuming civilizations that fought them with weapons or tried to hide from them. They had never encountered a galaxy that fought back with pure, defiant consciousness. One by one, the dark ships stopped moving. Some simply dissolved, their matter returning to the void. Others drifted away, carrying their confused intelligence back to whatever realm had spawned them. When the last enemy vessel disappeared, the galaxy fell silent except for the celebration that erupted on a million worlds. President Han Su-bin addressed the Galactic Assembly from Earth's revealed surface, standing beneath structures that touched the clouds. "We are not your rulers," she said to the representatives of every species. "We are your family." The ancient humans made a choice 100,000 years ago to step back and let their children grow. Today you have all proven worthy of that choice. Captain Lee stood on the bridge of Eternal Dawn, watching as the ancient network transformed from a weapon into something new, a permanent connection between all conscious beings in the galaxy. Not a hive mind, but a community mind where every individual voice could be heard and valued. "What happens now?" Commander O asked. "Now we grow," Lee replied. "All of us together. The galaxy is safe, but more than that, it's alive in a way it never was before." Dr. Park So-min established the first galactic university on the planet that had once been called Kethmara, where the discovery had begun. Students from every species came to learn not just facts and skills, but how to think in new ways, how to celebrate differences, and how to build bridges between vastly different forms of consciousness. Aria became the galaxy's librarian, maintaining the vast repository of knowledge while helping new generations of beings discover their own unique gifts. The ancient AI had waited 100,000 years to see the children of her creators surpass their parents' achievements. Earth took its place as the galaxy's heart, not its capital. The planet's true nature as a consciousness amplifier helped every species reach new heights of creativity and understanding. But humanity's greatest achievement wasn't their technology or their ancient heritage. It was their willingness to let go. Unlike their ancestors, who had tried to guide the galaxy through direct control, modern humans chose to guide through example. They showed other species how to grow, how to think, how to be themselves more fully, and then stepped back to let them surpass humanity itself. The galaxy entered a new age of expansion and discovery. not driven by conquest or competition, but by curiosity and cooperation. The joint expedition fleet moved through space toward the coordinates hidden in the ancient ruins. Captain Lee Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the Earthship Discovery, watching the alien vessels that surrounded them. 3 weeks of political negotiations had finally produced this uneasy alliance. Captain Bae Jin-ho, the military commander assigned to protect the expedition, approached Lee with a concerned expression. "I don't like this, Tae-ho. Half these ships have weapons pointed at us." "I know," Lee replied quietly, "but it was the only way the Council would let us investigate the coordinates. They want witnesses from every major species." Agent Nam Yoonji, their intelligence operative, moved closer to them. "My sources say Councillor Veltar is planning something. He's convinced several species that humans are trying to claim dominance over the galaxy." Through the viewport, Lee could see their destination growing larger. The coordinates had led them to the Nexus sector, a region of space controlled by the ancient Krexhan Empire. What they found there defied explanation. It was a structure the size of a small moon, perfectly spherical and covered in the same symbols they had found on Kethmara. But this was no ruin. Energy readings showed the structure was still active, still powered after 100,000 years. "How is that possible?" Captain Bae whispered. The communication system crackled to life. "Human vessel, this is Elder Krexvan of the Krexhan fleet. We have been expecting you." Lee exchanged glances with his officers. "Elder Krexvan, this is Captain Lee Tae-ho. You've been expecting us?" "For longer than you know, Captain. My people have guarded this place for 10,000 generations. We have been waiting for the children of the first ones to return." The alien fleets formed a loose formation around the massive structure, as small shuttles carried representatives from each species toward docking ports that opened like flowers in the structure's surface. Lee found himself in a shuttle with representatives from 6 different species, all of them watching him with mixtures of curiosity and suspicion. Elder Krexvan was waiting for them in the docking bay. He was tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. His species was one of the oldest in known space, and he carried himself with the dignity of someone who had seen centuries pass. "Captain Lee," he said, his voice carrying the weight of ages. "You look exactly like them." "Like who?" Lee asked. "The first ones, the teachers, the ones my people called the Star Shapers." Krexvan turned and began walking deeper into the structure. "Come, it is time you learned the truth about your heritage." The corridors were vast and filled with the same flowing architecture they had seen in the ruins. But here, everything was perfect and pristine. Lights activated as they walked, and the air hummed with barely contained energy. "My people have oral traditions that go back 50,000 years, Krexvan explained as they walked. "Stories of beings who looked like you, who came from the stars and taught us to reach for them ourselves. We thought they were myths until the day they told us to guard this place." "They spoke to you directly?" asked Dr. Park So-min, who had joined the expedition. "Not to me personally, but to my ancestors, yes. They said their children would return one day, and we would know them by their faces and their hearts." They entered a vast chamber at the center of the structure. The walls stretched up into darkness, covered with moving lights that formed patterns too complex to follow. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform with what looked like a control interface. "What is this place?" Lee asked. "The first vault," Krexvan replied. "The repository of everything the Star Shapers wanted their children to know." As they approached the platform, the lights in the chamber began to pulse faster. A holographic display materialized in the air above them, showing star charts and data streams in languages that looked human, but were older than any known writing. "Captain Lee," Krexvan said formally. "Please place your hand on the interface." Lee hesitated. Representatives from the other species were watching him carefully, some with their hands near their weapons. But something deep inside him was calling him forward, a feeling that this was what he was meant to do. He placed his palm on the smooth surface of the interface. The chamber exploded into light and sound. Holographic displays appeared everywhere, showing the history of the galaxy in fast-forward motion. Lee saw the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars, and through it all, the presence of beings who looked unmistakably human. A voice filled the chamber, speaking in ancient Korean but somehow understandable to everyone present. "Welcome, heir to the first throne. We have been waiting for you to return." The displays focused on Earth, showing it not as the simple world they knew, but as it had been 100,000 years ago. A world covered with cities that touched the clouds and ships that moved between the stars. The hologram showed humans spreading across the galaxy, establishing colonies and uplifting younger species. "Impossible," whispered Counselor Veltar, who had remained silent until now. The hologram continued, showing the humans making contact with primitive versions of all the current galactic species. They shared technology, guided development, and helped entire civilizations reach for the stars. Earth was shown as the center of a vast network of worlds, all connected by human knowledge and protection. But then something changed. The displays showed darkness spreading from the edge of the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. Worlds went silent. Entire star systems disappeared. The human colonies began falling back toward Earth, fighting a retreating battle against something that the records called the Silence. "What is the Silence?" Captain Bay asked. The hologram showed fleeting images of something that hurt to look at directly. Ships without crews that moved like living things. Worlds stripped of all life and thought. Civilizations that suddenly stopped thinking and became extensions of something hungry and vast. "The enemy of consciousness itself," the ancient voice explained. "A force that consumes not just life, but the very concept of individual thought. We fought it for 1,000 years before we realized the truth." "What truth?" Lee asked. "That we could not defeat it by fighting. The only way to protect the galaxy was to hide, to erase ourselves from history and let our children develop without the knowledge that would attract its attention." The displays showed the human fleets pulling back to Earth while automated systems began destroying all evidence of their civilization. Colonies were abandoned, records were erased, and the surviving humans went into deep hiding on Earth itself. "The plan was simple," the voice continued. "Hide the teachers, protect the children, and wait for them to grow strong enough to face what we could not. You are those children, Captain Lee. All the species in this room are the children of Earth's first civilization." The implications hit everyone at once. The Kregzhan, the Veltari, the Centaurians. All of them had been uplifted and guided by ancient humans. They were not separate species that had developed independently. They were all part of humanity's legacy. "This is lies," Veltar hissed, but his voice lacked conviction. Elder Krexvan stepped forward. "It is not lies, Counselor. My people's oldest stories speak of the star shapers who taught us to build our first ships. Stories we thought were myths until today." The holographic display shifted, showing real-time sensor readings from the edge of the galaxy. Dark shapes were moving in the void between stars, heading toward known space. The silence was returning. "How long do we have?" Lee asked. "Unknown," the ancient voice replied. "But the signs suggest they have found the galaxy again. The children must decide. Will you unite as your ancestors hoped, or will you face the darkness divided?" The chamber fell silent except for the humming of ancient machinery. Representatives from a dozen species looked at each other with new understanding. They were not competing civilizations struggling for dominance. They were all part of the same family, all inheritors of the same legacy. "What do you need from us?" Elder Krexvan asked Lee. "I don't know yet," Lee replied honestly, "but we need to get back to our worlds and prepare. All of us." As the expedition teams prepared to return to their ships, Lee took one last look around the first vault. His ancestors had built this place as a message to the future, a warning and a gift combined. Now it was up to him and the others to prove worthy of that legacy. But as they flew back through space toward their various worlds, long-range sensors were already detecting the approach of something vast and hungry from the darkness between stars. The silence had found them, and humanity's greatest test was about to begin. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from every known species gathered not in the usual chamber, but aboard the massive first vault itself. The ancient structure had become humanity's gift to the galaxy, a repository of knowledge that belonged to all of them. Admiral Seo Dong-hyun stood before the assembled delegates, his uniform crisp, despite the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Behind him, holographic displays showed the approaching darkness that long-range sensors had detected at the galaxy's edge. "The entity we call the Silence has been traveling for 100,000 years, Admiral Seo explained to the silent crowd. "Our ancestors' records show it as a force that doesn't just destroy civilizations. It erases the very concept of individual thought." Captain Lee Tae-ho watched from the side of the chamber as Arya. The vault's artificial intelligence manifested as a shimmering hologram beside the Admiral. The AI had been created by the ancient humans and had waited patiently for their descendants to return. The silence functions as a hive mind, Arya explained, her voice carrying the wisdom of ages. It spreads by converting other conscious beings into extensions of itself. Worlds touched by the silence become empty of individual thought. Their populations turned into biological machines, serving a single, hungry consciousness. Dr. Lim Hae-won, the geneticist who had been studying the connections between ancient and modern humans, stepped forward with her latest findings. Arya has helped us understand something crucial about our biology. The reason modern humans survived while the ancients went into hiding is because we're different from them. Different how? Asked Elder Krexvan. We're immune, Dr. Lim replied. Not completely, but significantly resistant to the mental invasion that the silence uses to convert other species. The ancient humans modified their own genetics before going into hiding, creating a line of descendants who could resist assimilation. Murmurs spread through the assembly. Counselor Veltar, who had been surprisingly quiet since the revelations at the first vault, finally spoke. Are you saying humans are somehow superior to the rest of us? No, Captain Lee said, standing up. We're saying we're tools. Our ancestors created us to be living weapons against the silence, but not to fight alone. Arya nodded approvingly. The ancient humans discovered that consciousness itself is the weapon against the silence. Individual thought, creativity, the ability to choose, these are things the silence cannot understand or convert. But it requires more than just resistance. It requires unity of purpose combined with diversity of thought. Admiral Seo activated a new display showing the current state of galactic defenses. The ancient humans didn't just hide themselves. They hid technology throughout the galaxy. Defensive networks, advanced warships, terraforming systems, all waiting for the right genetic signatures to activate them. As if summoned by his words, reports began flowing in from across the galaxy. Ancient structures were awakening on dozens of worlds. Massive defense platforms were rising from the surfaces of moons where they had waited buried for millennia. Ships that had been disguised as asteroids were powering up with technology that made current galactic navies look primitive. The question, Admiral Seo continued, is whether we can work together to use these gifts. The ancient humans believed their children could succeed where they failed. But only if we unite. The debate that followed was intense. Some species wanted to submit to human leadership immediately, treating them as the returning gods of their ancestors. Others, led by a still suspicious faction around Veltar, wanted to maintain independence and use the ancient technology for their own defense. It was Elder Krexvan who found the middle path. We are all children of the same teachers, he said, his ancient voice carrying clearly through the chamber. But children must eventually surpass their parents. The question is not whether humans should lead us, but whether we can all learn to lead together. Back on Earth, Captain Lee stood in a facility that had been hidden beneath the planet's surface for 100,000 years. Arya had guided them to it after genetic scans confirmed Lee's compatibility with the ancient systems. This is the neural archive, Arya explained as they walked through corridors lined with crystalline structures that pulsed with soft light. The collected knowledge and experience of the entire ancient human civilization. Why me? Lee asked. Why am I compatible when others aren't? Not genetics alone, Arya replied. Character, the ability to hold vast knowledge without being corrupted by it. The ancient humans learned that power shared is power strengthened. You have shown this understanding. They reached a chamber where a single chair sat surrounded by the crystalline structures. Neural interface cables hung from the ceiling like sleeping serpents. The process will connect you to the memories and knowledge of millions of ancient humans, Arya warned. You will remain yourself, but you will also carry their experiences. It may be overwhelming. Lee looked at the chair that would change him forever. What will I become? A bridge, Arya said simply, between what was and what must be. As Lee underwent the neural linking process, events were accelerating across the galaxy. The approaching Silence Fleet had been detected by reactivated ancient sensors. The enemy ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls seeming to absorb light itself. Admiral Seo coordinated the galactic response from the command center that Arya had awakened beneath Earth's largest ocean. The ancient facility was vast beyond imagination. with tactical displays showing the position of every reactivated defense system in the galaxy. The Silence Fleet will reach the outer colonies in 6 months, reported Commander Oh Jun-seok, who was leading the first squadron of reactivated ancient warships. Their ships are massive, some of them the size of small moons. How many ships do we have? Admiral Seo asked. The ancient humans hid thousands of vessels throughout the galaxy, Arya replied. But they will not be enough for a direct confrontation. The Silence has had 100,000 years to grow stronger. When Lee emerged from the neural linking process, he was changed, but still recognizably himself. His eyes held depth that spoke of vast experience, but his voice was still his own. I understand now, he said to the assembled command staff. The ancient humans didn't fail because they were weak. They failed because they tried to fight the Silence the way they would fight any enemy. But the Silence isn't just an enemy. It's the opposite of everything that makes consciousness possible. What does that mean for us? Admiral Seo asked. It means we don't just fight it, Lee replied. We have to prove that consciousness is stronger than hunger, that diversity is stronger than unity, that the choice to be individuals is more powerful than the compulsion to be one. Dr. Park So-min, who had been analyzing the enemy ships, looked up from her displays. The Silence fleets are broadcasting something, a signal that seems designed to affect neural activity. Conversion signals, Arya confirmed. They are trying to prepare the galaxy for assimilation by weakening individual thought patterns. Can we block it? Commander O asked. Not block, Lee said, the ancient knowledge flowing through him. Counter it. The ancient humans discovered that the best defense against mental invasion is mental strength. We need to make every conscious being in the galaxy more themselves, not less. The plan that emerged from that meeting was unlike any military strategy in galactic history. Instead of massing fleets for battle, they would spread consciousness itself. Every species would contribute their unique perspectives and abilities. Artists would create works that celebrated individual expression. Scientists would pursue discoveries that highlighted the power of curiosity. Teachers would help every being understand their own unique value. But even as the galaxy began to unite in this strange new form of warfare, the dark ships of the Silence continued their approach. Soon they would test whether consciousness really was stronger than the hunger that consumed worlds. The final battle would not be fought with weapons alone, but with the very essence of what it meant to be alive and thinking and free. The secret meeting room beneath Earth's Capitol building was filled with tension. Captain Lee Tae-ho sat at the long table, facing a panel of government officials and scientists who had been sworn to secrecy. The evidence from Kethamara was spread across multiple screens around the room. This is quite a story, Captain, said Director Kim Jae-sung, Earth's chief representative to the Galactic Council. But you're asking us to believe that humans built those ruins 100,000 years ago. I'm not asking you to believe anything, Lee replied. I'm asking you to look at the evidence. Dr. Yoon Mi-ra, the linguist they had called in to study the recordings, cleared her throat. Director Kim, I've spent the last week analyzing the holographic messages. The language is definitely related to Earth languages, but it's much older than anything we have records of. She activated a screen showing wave patterns and linguistic breakdowns. The sentence structure follows patterns we see in ancient Korean, but mixed with elements that match theoretical proto-languages from other parts of Earth. It's as if someone took the root languages that all Earth languages came from and kept them alive. What are they actually saying? Asked General Park, the military representative. That's where it gets interesting, Yoon said. They talk about the first children and seeding the stars. They mention something called the Great Hiding and refer to Earth as the protected world. Lee leaned forward. There's more. We've been checking other archaeological sites across the galaxy, sites that were thought to be from different alien civilizations. But now that we know what to look for, we're finding the same symbols, the same architectural patterns. Director Kim looked troubled. Are you saying humans have been to these other worlds? I'm saying the evidence suggests it, Lee replied. And there's something else. Dr. Chen has been analyzing genetic samples from several supposedly extinct alien species. Dr. Chen Wei stood up, activating another screen. The results are disturbing. These alien species show genetic markers that are remarkably similar to human DNA. Not identical, but like they were, guided somehow, enhanced. The room fell silent. General Park was the first to speak. You're talking about genetic engineering on a galactic scale. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Chen replied. Someone with advanced knowledge of genetics helped shape the development of multiple species across the galaxy. And the techniques match theoretical models of what human science might achieve in a few thousand years. Director Kim stood up and began pacing. This is impossible. If humans had that kind of technology 100,000 years ago, what happened to it? Where did it go? Maybe they hid it, suggested Dr. Yoon. The recordings mentioned the Great Hiding. What if ancient humans deliberately concealed their technology and history? But why? General Park asked. Before anyone could answer, Kim's communication device beeped urgently. He checked the message and his face went pale. We have a problem. Counselor Veltar is demanding an emergency session of the Galactic Council. He's claiming that humans are hiding evidence of their true origins. Lee felt his stomach drop. How could he know? Someone talked, Kim said grimly. Or they've been watching us more closely than we thought. The next day, Kim stood before the assembled Galactic Council on the space station orbiting Centauri Prime. The chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species, their various forms creating a symphony of different biologies and technologies. Counselor Veltar, a tall reptilian being with cold yellow eyes, rose from his seat. Honored representatives, we have received disturbing reports that the humans are fabricating archaeological evidence to support false claims about their history. That's a lie, Kim said, standing up from the human delegation's seats. We have discovered legitimate archaeological sites that raise questions about galactic history. Questions? Veltar's voice carried a mocking tone. Or convenient stories designed to make your primitive species seem more important than it is. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Kim could see doubt and suspicion on many faces. Humanity had always been viewed as the newcomers, the young species that had been lucky enough to be discovered and uplifted. The idea that they might be hiding a more significant past threatened the established order. If humans have nothing to hide, Veltar continued, then let them share this evidence with the full council for independent analysis. Kim knew this was a trap. If they shared everything now before they understood it themselves, other species might use the information against humanity. But if they refused, it would look like they were indeed hiding something. The investigation is ongoing, Kim said carefully. We will share our findings when the analysis is complete. How convenient, Veltar replied. The newcomers claim ancient heritage but refuse to provide proof. Back on Earth, Lee and his team worked frantically to understand what they had found. More evidence kept appearing. Ancient ruins on 12 different worlds, all showing signs of human presence. Genetic markers in extinct species that suggested deliberate modification. Star charts that showed Earth at the center of a vast network. But the most disturbing discovery came from Dr. Yoon's continued translation work. She burst into the research lab with a datapad in her hands, her face flushed with excitement and fear. I figured out more of the recordings, she announced. The ancient humans weren't just explorers or colonists. According to these messages, they were running from something. Running from what? Lee asked. They call it the silence, something that was hunting them across the galaxy. The recordings talk about a great war and a difficult choice. They say they had to hide the children to protect them from the hunger that eats minds. Dr. Chen looked up from his genetic analysis. That would explain the genetic modifications. If they were preparing other species for some kind of threat. But what happened to the ancient humans themselves? Lee wondered. Yoon scrolled through her translations. According to this, they didn't disappear. They went into hiding on a protected world, where they would wait and watch until the children were ready. The implications hit everyone at the same time. Lee felt the room spinning around him. Earth. They're talking about Earth. We're not descendants of primitive humans who developed naturally, Chen said slowly. We're descendants of an advanced galactic civilization that went into hiding. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Director Kim's voice came over the communication system. All research staff to secure stations immediately. We have multiple alien ships entering Earth's solar system. Lee ran to the window and looked up at the sky. Even in daylight, he could see the dark shapes moving between the stars. Ships from a dozen different species all converging on Earth. They're not here for a friendly visit. General Park's voice came over the intercom. Counselor Veltar is demanding immediate access to all human archaeological sites. He's got the backing of half the Galactic Council. Lee turned back to his team. How much time do we need to finish the analysis? Weeks, maybe months, Yun replied. We don't have that long, Lee said. We need to find the source. If the ancient humans really did hide something on Earth, we need to find it before they do. Chen was already pulling up geological surveys of Earth. If I were an advanced civilization trying to hide something, where would I put it? Somewhere stable, Yun suggested. Somewhere that would last for 100,000 years. And somewhere connected to all the other sites, Lee added. The star charts all point back to Earth for a reason. As alien ships filled the sky above them, the small team of humans raced to uncover the truth about their own past. The galaxy was watching, and the future of humanity might depend on what they found buried in their own world. But Lee couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, something else was watching and waiting for its chance to return. Captain Lee Taeho stood at the edge of the massive pit, watching his team lower themselves into the ancient ruins below. The planet Kethamara was supposed to be empty, dead, just another rock floating in space that the Galactic Council had marked for mining operations. But the deep scans had found something else entirely. Captain, you need to see this, Dr. Park So-min called from below. Her voice echoed strangely in the underground chamber, carrying a note of excitement that made Lee's heart race. He rappelled down the rope, his boots hitting the smooth stone floor with a soft thud. The chamber stretched out before him, vast and dark except for the portable lights his team had set up. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to dance in the flickering light. What am I looking at, So-min? Lee asked, walking toward the archaeologist who was crouched near one of the walls. I'm not sure yet, she replied, running her fingers over the carved symbols. But these markings, they remind me of something from Earth. Engineer Choi Hyun-woo looked up from his equipment. The dating scan just finished. Captain, these ruins are old. Really old. The computer says they're over 100,000 years old. Lee felt his stomach drop. 100,000 years would make these ruins older than any known civilization in the galaxy. The oldest species they knew about, the Veltari, had only achieved spaceflight 50,000 years ago. Before that, the galaxy was supposed to be empty of intelligent life. That can't be right, Lee said. Run the scan again. I already did 3 times, Hyun-woo replied. The results are the same every time. Dr. Park stood up, her face pale in the artificial light. Captain, I need to show you something else. She led him deeper into the chamber, past rows of carved pillars and strange mechanical devices that had long since stopped working. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform with what looked like a control panel. Above it, holographic projectors hung from the ceiling like sleeping metal flowers. The air in this part of the chamber felt different, charged with an energy that made the hair on Lee's arms stand up. Look at this, So-min said, pointing to a series of symbols carved into the platform. I've seen these before. Not exactly the same, but similar. They look like ancient Korean characters mixed with other Earth languages. Lee knelt down to examine the symbols more closely. She was right. The flowing lines and geometric shapes reminded him of the old writing systems he had studied in school, but that was impossible. Earth had been isolated until 30 years ago when the Galactic Council found them. Humans had never been in space before then. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Lee said, but his voice lacked conviction. Captain, Hyun-woo called from across the chamber. I found something else. There's a star map over here. They hurried to where the engineer was standing. On the wall was a massive carved map showing hundreds of star systems connected by flowing lines. Lee recognized several of the constellations immediately. That's the Orion arm, he said, pointing to a section of the map. And that's the Centauri system. Yes, So-min said, her voice barely above a whisper. And look at this. She pointed to a star at the center of the map, highlighted with special symbols and connected to every other system by golden lines. That's Sol, that's our sun. The 3 humans stood in silence, staring at the map. Earth was shown as the center of some vast network that stretched across the galaxy. But how could that be? Humans had never been to space before the aliens found them. Maybe whoever built this was watching us, Hyun-woo suggested. Maybe they knew about Earth and marked it for some reason. For 100,000 years? So-min asked. Why would anyone watch a planet full of primitive humans for that long? Lee was about to respond when something clicked. A deep humming sound filled the chamber, and the holographic projectors above the platform began to glow. The team backed away as beams of light shot down from the ceiling, forming shapes in the air above the control panel. The holograms showed figures walking through chambers much like the one they were standing in. The figures were tall and humanoid, wearing clothes that looked almost ceremonial. But what made Lee's breath catch in his throat was their faces. They looked human. Not alien, not strange, but completely undeniably human. "This is impossible," Hyunwoo whispered. The holographic figures moved with purpose, operating controls and examining star charts. One of them turned toward the recording device, and Lee found himself staring into the face of a woman who could have been his sister. She began to speak, and the words that came from the ancient speakers made no sense but somehow felt familiar. "Can you understand any of it?" Lee asked Somin. She was listening intently, her head tilted to one side. "Some of it. It sounds like really old Korean mixed with other Earth languages. Proto-languages that linguists think might have existed thousands of years ago." The hologram continued for several minutes before fading away. The chamber fell silent again, leaving the three humans alone with their racing thoughts and impossible questions. "We need to document everything," Lee said finally. "Every symbol, every device, every scrap of evidence. But we don't report this to the council yet. Not until we understand what we're looking at, Captain," Somin said quietly. "What if the council already knows? What if this is why they really came to Earth 30 years ago?" Lee had been wondering the same thing. Humanity had always been told they were discovered by accident during a routine exploration mission. But what if that wasn't true? What if the aliens had been looking for them specifically? "We'll figure it out," he said. "But carefully. If these ruins really are connected to Earth somehow, then everything we know about human history might be wrong." They worked for the next 6 hours, carefully photographing and measuring everything in the chamber. Hyunwoo found more control panels hidden behind decorative panels. Somin discovered additional chambers branching off from the main room, each filled with more carvings and ancient technology. As they prepared to return to their ship, Lee took one last look around the chamber. The symbols on the walls seemed to watch him, holding secrets that had been buried for longer than human civilization had existed. But they were human secrets. He was sure of that now. The question was, what had happened to the people who built this place? And why had they hidden the truth from their own descendants? Back on the ship, Lee sealed the recordings in an encrypted file and set course for Earth. They had a lot of questions to ask, and he had a feeling the answers were going to change everything humanity thought they knew about themselves. The stars outside the viewport looked different now. Instead of being vast and empty, they seemed full of possibilities and hidden truths. Earth wasn't the newcomer to the galaxy that everyone believed it to be. Earth had been here first.